Welcome back everybody, Draskyl here, once again with another video. We're still on the subject of counters. So far, we've released 3 videos, I believe, on counters, mostly covering, one was just the broad what types of counters there are, then there were 2 videos regarding specifically lane counters. This video is going to be a bit different than everything that I've done prior in regards to what the counter videos had been about. This one is going to try to cover a lot of information in a very broad way. So we're going to take some examples of what we will call gameplay counters, and we're going to point them out. We're going to explain why they are the way they are, and we're also going to discuss what you can do sometimes in those situations to hopefully, if you're playing into them, you can still have somewhat of a game. So I'm going to give some really obvious examples first of what you would call a gameplay counter. First, we're going to look at heroes like Anti-Mage and Spirit Breaker matchups, so like AM versus Spirit Breaker specifically. The reason why this would be considered a gameplay counter for Anti-Mage is that when you're playing Anti-Mage, you have a habit of sitting in side lanes and split pushing a lot, and Spirit Breaker has a very good way to cover the map very quickly, and if you get caught by a Spirit Breaker charge, most of the time you're not going to be able to react and be able to blink away, and then follow-up stuns can ensue and your hero can die. There's also an additional layer to this where we'll call it map pressure, where you feel like when you're playing heroes like Anti-Mage, you can't occupy the space that you want to occupy because this hero is on the enemy team. And I'm sure if you've played carry or you've played even a support and you don't have a stun and you've played against Spirit Breaker, you felt that kind of presence from him where you feel unsafe pushing down a lane, or you feel like you can't really play as aggressively as you want to, or you can't split push. So this is a very common and easy to understand example of what a gameplay counter would be for a hero like Anti-Mage. Now, Spirit Breaker does very similar things against Lifestealer and Juggernaut. These are primarily because Spirit Breaker's abilities go through magic immunity. So Jug and Lifestealer, when they're pushing a side lane as well, they can feel pretty safe in a lot of games because they can either use Blade Fury or they can use Rage, and then they can just teleport if the enemy team can't stun them through their magic immunity skills. Spirit Breaker does this just innately by having levels, so it makes these types of heroes feel a lot less comfortable as well. So if you're looking at safe lane heroes or just core heroes in general that you would want to think about as how do I gameplay counter a hero like Spirit Breaker who stops me from being in a side lane, the go-to solution would typically be something like a core that enables your 5-man. So I mentioned Juggernaut in regards to split pushing. However, Juggernaut has an ability called Healing Ward that allows you to 5-man. So if you were playing a Juggernaut into Spirit Breaker, the counterplay example here would be instead of trying to play a split push oriented game, you would build items to potentially frontline for your team, like your SNYs, maybe buy like a Maelstrom and a Basher and stuff like that, and go fight as 5 because Spirit Breaker is way weaker when he's being forced into a full 5-on-5 engagement. Spirit Breaker's abilities are hard to utilize in a 5 versus 5 setting as well as you can in a side lane where you know you're just going to guarantee that charge. Lots of ground target spells being thrown around, just random damage being taken and stuff like that. And charging into pressing Nether Strike is a lot more difficult. So when you're playing these types of heroes into Spirit Breaker, that is something that you could keep in mind, as the hero's inherent weakness is how you want to play your game. Now, they are called counters for a reason. If you end up being in a situation where you pick and the counter to your hero picks in the same phase and it's a blind pick and you didn't see it, now you can think about the way that that hero expects you to play the game and try to do something different about it. So either don't show in lane as much and ask other heroes who have an easier time to show, or you can just say, hey, let's group up and play together. Let's buy some 5-man oriented items so that this hero specifically doesn't stop me from doing or from having any impact in the game. Now, that sometimes this is going to require communication, and that's fine. But the general idea is that when a counter is really effective is when you play the game the way they expect you to. So if you're playing AM, you're split pushing. When you're playing Juggernaut or Lifestealer, sometimes you're going to be split pushing. So if you play to that hero's strength and you're countered, obviously that's going to be a problem. So we want to try to avoid giving them the freest possible time whenever you can. Now, obviously, you're not going to be able to do this in every single game. Maybe the enemy team has overwhelming team fight, and you just can't fight them 5v5. Then we would probably just consider that an outdraft. Like, if no one's having a good game, and you can't split push, and there's a Spirit Breaker, well then, sometimes it just happens that way, and you might have to just go next. So we can give another example of this style of counter, where when we say gameplay, we're just referring to what a hero's job is within the confines of the game. And a lot of the situations that we're going to be talking about in this video are exclusively for cores, because it's a lot harder for a core to play the map if they don't know what's going to kill them. So the Spirit Breaker example is very obvious, because if Spirit Breaker charges you and then ults you, good chance as even a core hero, even with a BKB, you're still going to end up dying. So if we wanted to give some other examples of heroes that being played as cores that have natural counters and are also fairly popular, Spectre is also on that list. Obviously a hero who needs quite a bit of time. Her laning phase is pretty subpar, and then her mid to late game is super scary. Most people who've played Dota for any amount of time would be able to tell you these things. But people fail to realize that a hero can be countered how quickly you play the game just as easily as by what heroes you're playing as well. Spectre is not the type of hero that is super strong just right at the start, and you need quite a few items in order to be able to really come into your own as this hero. A lot of people are doing the Echo Saber Treads build, which has seen some popularity in early mid-game fighting. But by no means is this hero like a powerhouse until much, much later into the game. So, with that in mind, if we were going to counter her in any way, we want to take away her ability to farm the map, and we want to play fast. Now, when people say play fast, what they mean is take objectives, do not allow the enemy team to occupy their own side of the map safely. This is an overarching concept of Dota that you can apply to basically any game, is how much pressure am I applying to my opponent during the time where they are at their weakest. If you know a hero is going to gain power the longer the game goes, and they carry items more efficiently than whatever team composition you have, then you are on a timer. And this is another concept that we'll probably talk about in a later video about timings and how they matter for so many different reasons. But let's just say if you let a Spectre farm for an hour, the Spectre is probably going to be strong. But people inside of a Dota game don't necessarily think this. They might win the lane and say, oh, we won the lane, but then you let the Spectre farm for 25 minutes without really thinking about it, or not taking enough towers, or not holding map control, and then all of a sudden you're dealing with a hero that has 4 items and you no longer have the damage to kill her. So the best options for dealing with these types of heroes specifically is if you see Spectre and you're a core hero, you can pick heroes like Jug. Again, a sustain hero that enables 5-man. Oftentimes, heroes like Luna work really well also. Just thinking about, okay, so if I really want to pressure, what can I do as a core? I can pick a hero that either out-carries, so you could think maybe Terrorblade, or you could pick a hero that makes my team want to group up around me and just take the map away as quickly as you can. And in those cases, I would suggest either the Lone Druid, maybe even if this hero ever comes back into the meta. You could play Luna, you could play Jug. Drow can work, but it's risky. There's all these sort of gameplay counters to each individual core within the game, but you have to know what your lineup needs in order for that hero to fully be countered. So, as well as gameplay counters, there are also a subsection of gameplay counters we will call itemization counters. And this typically means there's a lion on the enemy team, and you're playing a mobility hero. Eventually that lion is going to get a blink dagger, and then your game is going to become significantly harder to play, because even with things like BKB, there is a good chance that you can just be CC'd without being able to react, and then you die as a result. So this is kind of in the same vein as Spirit Breaker. The difference is that Spirit Breaker counters you by having Charge and Bash, which are innate skill sets. Lion doesn't counter you on a lot of these heroes as a core, until you see the item on him, in this case, Blink Dagger. So if the Lion doesn't have Blink and you're playing, you know, your AMs, your Faceless Voids, whoever, you're probably feeling pretty safe. But the later the game goes, that timing hits where the Lion acquires Blink, and then suddenly the game is not as easy for you to play, and you have to be a lot more careful about how you choose to fight and how you choose to play the map. So all these things kind of are learned over time and experience. But suffice to say, the way that gameplay counters work is sort of like a rock, paper, scissors. It used to be in the past that push would lose to team fight, and then team fight would lose to split push, and then split push would lose to ganking. Those things are still loosely true. The map has changed a few times, and it's kind of hard to punish greed right now due to how the map layout is and how good stacking and all these other things are. But if you can keep that kind of rock, paper, scissors in your head when you're thinking about how the flow of the game is going to be going with your heroes, if you can get that far, you're already going to be in a really good spot in regards to what's countering you and what you can do to counter them. So we're going to try to keep this particular video a little short. The later videos are going to give examples, and we're going to go over in detail why everything is happening and why the plays and the heroes and the items and all these other things kind of culminate in making sure that the enemy team can't play Dota the way that they want. So I hope this video has been somewhat informative, at least at a basic level, as to how counters work. And next time, we're going to be going over some specific examples. Hope you guys are all doing great. If you guys want to catch me live, you can do so at twitch.tv/Draskyl, same as it is in the YouTube. And we'll see you guys real soon.